Welcome to my channel. Have you ever felt bored while learning English? Words feel dry. Grammar feels hard. You try to study, but your heart is not in it. That's what I felt, until one day, I read a love story. And everything changed. I started to feel English. I didn't just study it. I lived it. Love stories made me cry, laugh, and learn English without even trying. Comment below. Have you ever read a story that changed your life? Let me tell you my story now, chapter by chapter. Chapter 1. The Lonely Learner. I remember the time when English felt like a heavy door I could never open. I sat in class and looked at the board, but nothing made sense. The teacher spoke, and her voice became a blur of strange sounds. I tried to listen. I tried to follow. But my mind felt slow, like it couldn't catch the words. Everyone else was writing. Everyone else was reading. But I just sat there, silent, hoping nobody would ask me anything. I was afraid. Afraid to speak. Afraid to make a mistake. I thought maybe I was just not good at English. Maybe I would never understand it. Every day, I studied from textbooks. Grammar rules. Vocabulary lists. Fill-in-the-blank exercises. They were supposed to help me, but they only made me feel more tired. The words did not stay in my mind. I would read a page and forget it the next morning. I felt like I was studying a language that had no soul, no emotion, no life. I told myself to be strong, but deep inside, I was losing hope. I wanted to speak English. I really did. But the way I was learning, it didn't work for me. I was learning, but I was not feeling. And that made all the difference. Then one night, everything changed. I was lying in bed. My phone was in my hand. I was scrolling through random posts when I saw a short story. The title caught my eye. It said, "He waited for her every day." It was only a few lines. I clicked. I started reading. The story was in English. I didn't expect to understand. But I did. It was about a boy who stood by a coffee shop window every morning, hoping to see a girl he once met. The words were simple. The sentences were short. But the feelings? They were deep. As I read, something in me moved. I felt like I was there, watching him wait. And when the story ended, I had tears in my eyes. Not just because of the story, but because, for the first time, I understood English with my heart. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about the story. I thought, is this how I can learn? Through stories? Through feelings? The next morning, I searched for more. Short English love stories, I typed. And the internet gave me thousands. I picked one. Then another. And another. I started reading not because I had to, but because I wanted to. And that changed everything. My brain was not just learning. My heart was helping. I did not know every word, but I understood the meaning. I could guess the feelings. The sadness. The hope. The love. It felt like magic. Reading those stories made me feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Connection. Suddenly, English was no longer a subject. It became a friend. A friend that spoke to me through love, heartbreak, and dreams. I started writing down the sentences that touched me. Sentences like, "He loved her in silence," or "She never came back, but he still smiled." I did not understand every grammar rule in those sentences, but I felt the meaning. And I remembered the words. Because when you feel something, you don't forget it. That is how my real English journey began, not with a textbook, but with a story about a boy and a girl. I didn't know it then, but this was the beginning of a new life. A life where English was no longer my fear. It was my friend, my mirror, my voice. All because of one small story I read on a lonely night. And that's why I say, when the mind is tired, let the heart learn. That's when true learning begins. Chapter 2. My First Love Story. I still remember the title. It was called A Letter She Never Read. I found it online, on a page for English learners. The picture showed a girl sitting alone on a bench, holding a paper in her hand. I clicked on it, not expecting much. But when I started reading, something happened inside me. The first line said, "He wrote her a letter every day for a year, but never sent them." That one line made me stop. I read it again. And again. I could feel something I had never felt before while learning English. I felt a deep emotion. I wasn't just reading words. I was seeing the boy. I was feeling his sadness. I wanted to know more. The story was short. Only one page. But every word pulled me in. The sentences were easy to understand. No hard grammar. No confusing words. Just simple English, but full of meaning. I didn't need a dictionary. I could guess what was happening from the emotion. He loved her. She didn't know. He waited for her. She never came back. In the end, she found the letters, many years later. She cried. And so did I. Not because I'm too soft, but because the story was so human. And it was written in the English I could understand. I finished reading it in 5 minutes. But it stayed in my heart forever. That night, I wrote something in my notebook. Just one line. He loved her in silence. I didn't know why I wrote it, but it felt important. I looked at that line again and again. I even said it out loud. Slowly, softly. I started to feel confident. I was not just memorizing grammar. I was learning how to feel in English. I was learning the language of the heart. And that is the most powerful way to learn anything. The next day, I searched for more. I wanted stories that made me feel. I found another one. She called him every birthday. I clicked. Again, the English was simple. But the emotion was strong. I read the whole thing with full attention. I didn't look at my phone. I didn't get distracted. For the first time, I forgot I was studying. I was just reading, just feeling, just learning. I underlined new words like regret, promise, forever, and waited. And because I understood them in context, not from a dictionary, but from a story, I never forgot them. I realized something important that day. When you read a story that touches your heart, the language stays with you. Not just the meaning, but the feeling. You don't forget that. That's why love stories are so powerful for learning English. They are full of real feelings. Feelings we all understand. Love, loss, hope, sadness, joy. These emotions connect people. And they also connect languages. Love is the same in every country. But when you feel it in English, you grow. I started reading one story every day. Just one. Before sleeping. It became my new habit. My new secret. My own way of learning English. Some stories made me cry. Some made me smile. But every story gave me something. A new word. A beautiful sentence. A lesson about life. I started to copy the phrases I liked the most. I repeated them out loud. I tried to say them with the same emotion as the characters. It was like acting, but in English. And slowly, my pronunciation improved. My fluency got better. Not from a textbook, but from a simple love story. That first story, A Letter She Never Read, was not just a story. It was my door. It opened a path I never knew existed. A path where English is not boring. It is beautiful. It is alive. And it speaks directly to the heart. That's when I knew, this is how I want to learn. Chapter 3. Falling in love with reading. After reading a few stories, I knew something had changed. English was no longer something I had to study. It became something I wanted to feel. I didn't force myself anymore. I didn't count pages or set a timer. I just opened a love story, and the world disappeared. I read in the morning. I read before bed. Sometimes I read while waiting for food or standing in a line. I was not bored anymore. The stories were with me. They lived in my mind. I didn't feel alone. The characters were my friends. Their problems became my problems. Their words became my words. Every night, I made a small rule, one story before sleep. No matter how tired I was. No matter what happened that day. One story. That was my promise. Sometimes I read just one page. Sometimes I read 5. But I always read with feeling. I didn't read fast. I read slowly. I stopped when I saw a beautiful line. I read it again. And again. I whispered it. I felt it. I tried to say it like the characters would say it. I miss you every day. I waited, but you never came. He smiled, but his eyes were sad. These lines were simple, but powerful. I wrote them in my notebook. They became part of me. I started to notice something new. I was learning words without even trying. Not from boring word lists, but from moments, from emotions, from scenes that touched my heart. The word goodbye hit different when I read it in a sad story. The word promise felt deeper when a character broke one. This is how I learned. Slowly, naturally, emotionally. And because I learned with emotion, I remembered more. I didn't forget new words the next day. I didn't need flashcards. The stories taught me. I also began to see how love stories used real English. Not textbook English. Not robotic English. But living English. The kind you hear in movies, in messages, in real conversations. Things like, I was thinking about you. I didn't mean to hurt you. Let's talk, even if it's hard. These are the kinds of sentences we say in real life. These are the words we need. And love stories gave them to me. One line at a time. Reading became more than a habit. It became my comfort. When I felt stressed, I read. When I felt sad, I read. When I felt happy, I still read. It became my secret world. A world where I was safe. A world where I was learning without pressure. Some nights, I even cried after reading. Not because I was weak, but because the story made me feel so much. And I realized, if a story can make me cry in English, then I can understand English. I am learning. That gave me so much hope. My confidence started to grow. One day, I told my friend, I read a love story last night in English. She was surprised. She said, was it hard? I said, no. It was beautiful. That was a big moment for me. I used English to share something I loved. That's when I knew I was not just reading. I was living English now. That's how I fell in love. Not with a person, but with reading. With English. With stories that helped me become someone new. I wasn't just a student anymore. I was a reader. A dreamer. A learner who was no longer afraid. And it all started with one small promise. Just one story before bed. Chapter 4. Learning with Emotion. Something very powerful happened when I started reading with my heart, not just my mind. I realized that when I feel something, I remember it. I don't need to repeat it 10 times. I don't need to write it again and again. If a story touches my heart, the words stay with me, naturally. That's what emotion does. It opens the brain like a flower. It makes space for memory. It makes learning soft, not hard. And that's why love stories helped me. They were not about rules. They were about people. About feelings. And feelings go deeper than grammar. I remember one short story called Before the Train Left. It was about a girl who ran to the train station, holding a letter. She wanted to say sorry to someone she loved. But she arrived 1 minute late. The train was already gone. The story was just a few paragraphs. But when I finished reading it, I felt like someone punched my heart. I felt that girl's pain. I felt the regret. And the word regret, I will never forget it. I learned that word that day, not because I studied it, but because I felt it. Another time, I read a story where a boy kept his late wife's photo beside his bed. Every night, he whispered, "Good night, my love." That line made me cry. It also made me learn the word whisper. Before, I didn't know that word. But now, I do. Not just the meaning. I know the sound. I know the emotion behind it. That's how emotion teaches us. It gives words a soul. I started to understand that English is not just about speaking. It's about expressing. About sharing what's inside. When I read sad scenes, I felt sadness. When I read happy endings, I smiled. And because I was inside the story, I was inside the English language too. I was not outside anymore. I was not a stranger to it. I was a part of it. And that changed everything. I also started to feel less afraid of difficult words. If a story had a new word, I didn't run away. I stayed. I read the sentence again. I guessed the meaning. I felt the tone. And many times, I got it right. Emotion helped me understand even when the grammar was not clear. It gave me courage to try. It gave me power to keep going. I wasn't studying like a robot anymore. I was living like a reader. Like a lover of language. Some stories made me feel things I had never felt in English before. Words like forgive, betray, longing, grief. These are not just words. They are emotions. When I saw these in stories, I could feel their weight. I could feel their truth. And that's how I remembered them. That's how they became part of me. Even now, when I read a story that moves me, I feel thankful. Thankful that I found this way of learning. Emotional learning. Human learning. The kind that makes you cry, but also makes you grow. The kind that turns language into a feeling, not a formula. So if you're tired of grammar books, if you feel like English is cold and boring, try reading with your heart. Try learning with feeling. Read a story that makes you cry. Or smile. Or miss someone. That's how you'll remember the words. That's how English will stay with you. Chapter 5. Writing my own love story. After reading many love stories, something new started to grow inside me. I no longer just wanted to read stories. I wanted to write one. I wanted to use the words I had learned, the phrases I had copied, and the feelings I had felt, and create something of my own. At first, I was scared. My English is not good enough, I thought. What if my sentences are wrong? But then I remembered, the stories I read were not perfect. They were simple. They were honest. And that's what made them beautiful. So one evening, I opened my notebook and wrote the first sentence. She loved him, but she never told him. That was it. One line. But it was mine. I didn't stop there. I wrote the next line. Then another. I didn't care about grammar. I didn't worry about spelling. I just wanted to tell a feeling. The story started to grow. A girl who loved a boy. A secret she kept in her heart. A letter she wrote but never sent. I used the words I had learned from reading. Words like waited, missed, regret, hope. These were no longer new words to me. They were tools. They were keys. And with them, I was building something real. The first story I wrote was only 1 page long. But when I finished it, I felt something I had never felt before, proud. I had written a story in English. A story with characters, emotion, and meaning. It didn't matter if it was short. It didn't matter if it had mistakes. It was mine. It was my voice in a new language. And I felt alive. After that, writing became a part of my routine. Every week, I wrote a small love story. Sometimes just a paragraph. Sometimes more. I didn't write for marks. I didn't write for anyone else. I wrote for me. For my heart. For my growth. I kept a small journal where I wrote lines that I liked. Sometimes I copied lines from stories I read. Other times, I changed them into my own words. He waited in the rain became she cried in the rain, hoping he would come. These little changes helped me learn to think in English. Not just repeat, but create. I also started reading my stories out loud. In my room. To myself. At first, I felt silly. But then I realized, this was speaking practice. I was training my mouth. My tongue. My voice. I was learning the music of English. Slowly, I became more fluent. More clear. I started to hear myself like a real storyteller. And that gave me confidence I never had before. One day, I posted a small story online, in a group for English learners. The story was about two people who fall in love at a bookstore but never say hello. It was short. Just 10 lines. But to my surprise, people read it. And they commented. They said, beautiful. So emotional. Your English is so good. I smiled for hours that day. Because I realized something. I was not just a learner anymore. I was a writer. In English. Love stories didn't just teach me to read. They helped me find my own voice. My own feelings. My own way to express myself. That's what writing does. It makes you stronger. It makes you own the language. Not just understand it, but live it. And when you write from your heart, even simple English becomes powerful. So if you're reading stories now, that's beautiful. But one day, try writing your own. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just honest. Just real. Even one line can change something inside you. That's what it did for me. I wrote my own love story. And in that story, I found my English. Chapter 6. Real English, Real Feelings. After months of reading and writing love stories, something began to change inside me, and outside too. My English started to feel different. Before, it felt like a subject. Now, it felt like a part of me. Before, I used to say things like I am fine, thank you, or where is the library? But now, I could say things like I missed you yesterday or it hurt when you didn't call. These were not sentences from grammar books. These were real words. Real feelings. The kind of English people use when they talk about life. Love. Loss. Hope. And for the first time, I felt like I was not just learning English. I was using it to live. The words I learned from love stories became my language. Not just in writing, but in speaking too. I began to notice how I texted my friends. I would write, I was thinking about you, or that message really touched me. These were lines I had seen in stories. I never memorized them, but I remembered them. Why? Because they were full of emotion. And emotion stays. Grammar rules fade. Emotion remains. That's how I knew this was real English. The kind you feel in your bones. Even my listening got better. I started watching short romantic films and drama clips in English. I recognized the phrases I had read. I understood the dialogues without translation. When someone in the film said, I loved you even when you didn't love me, I didn't just understand the words. I understood the pain. I connected with the moment. And that's what made my learning deep, strong, lasting. In conversations, I felt braver. Not because I knew every word, but because I could express real feelings. I could say, I'm sorry if I hurt you. I could say, I understand how you feel. These are not hard sentences, but they are full of care. And care is what makes language human. I didn't feel like a robot anymore, trying to say perfect sentences. I felt like a person, trying to connect. And that's what English is really for, not to sound perfect, but to be understood. One moment I will never forget is when a friend shared something sad with me. She said she felt lonely. I wanted to comfort her. I said, "You're not alone. I care about you." She smiled and said, "Your English is so warm." That moment meant more to me than any test score, because I saw how words, simple English words, can touch a heart. And I knew then, my English was real. I also began to recommend love stories to other learners. Not just as practice, but as medicine, as healing, as a way to grow emotionally and linguistically. I would say, don't just read to learn. Read to feel. Because when you feel a story, you feel the language. And when you feel the language, it becomes yours. Looking back, I'm so grateful I chose this path. The path of stories. The path of emotion. Without them, I might have given up. But love stories gave me something special. Not just vocabulary, but voice. Not just practice, but passion. And that passion helped me speak with confidence. Write with honesty. And understand with heart. So if you want to speak real English, the kind that touches people, don't just study. Feel. Don't just read. Connect. Let the stories speak to your heart. And your heart will speak back. In English. Chapter 7. The day I understood everything. It was a quiet evening. I was sitting in my room with a cup of tea and my phone in my hand. I didn't feel like studying. I didn't want to watch videos or write anything. I just wanted peace. So I opened a long love story I had saved days ago. I didn't think much. I just started reading. Slowly. Softly. Line by line. And something happened. Something I never expected. I understood everything. Every word. Every sentence. Every emotion. I didn't stop to translate. I didn't pause to check a word. I didn't feel lost. I just read. And felt. And smiled. I was inside the story, like I belonged there. It was about two people who loved each other in silence. They met every day at the same cafe, talked about books, and smiled a little longer each time. But no one ever said, "I love you." They were afraid. Time passed. Life moved on. But their feelings stayed. And in the end, one of them finally said it. "I loved you from the very first day." The words were simple. But I cried. Not just because of the story, but because I realized I didn't need help to understand it. I had read it from start to end, and I understood it all. That moment felt like a dream. A quiet victory. A quiet miracle. I remembered how I started. How I didn't understand a single sentence. How English felt like noise. How I was scared to speak. Scared to read. I remembered the first story I read. The short lines. The tears. The confusion. I remembered how I kept going. One story at a time. One emotion at a time. And now here I was. Understanding a full love story. Without fear. Without pain. Just love. Just English. Just me. That night, I looked at myself in the mirror and smiled. Not because my English was perfect. It wasn't. Not because I knew all the grammar rules. I didn't. I smiled because I had become the person I wanted to be. A person who could feel, dream, and express in English. A person who could read a story not like a student, but like a reader. Like a human being. And that meant everything to me. The next day, I sent the story to a friend who was also learning English. I wrote, "You will love this." She replied later, "I couldn't understand it all, but I felt something." I told her, "That's enough. That's how I started too." And I felt proud. Because now, I was not just learning. I was sharing. Helping. Guiding. Like someone who has walked a long road and now lights the path for others. English is still a journey for me. I still make mistakes. I still learn new words. But now, I'm not afraid. I know I have the tools. I know I have the heart. I know I can understand. And more than that, I know I can feel in English. That's the biggest lesson love stories gave me. They didn't just teach me a language. They taught me how to connect, how to feel, how to grow. So if you're watching this, and you feel like English is hard, don't give up. Don't wait for perfect. Start with one story, one emotion, one sentence that touches your heart. Read it, repeat it, live it, and one day, you'll look back, just like I did, and you'll say, I understand everything now. If this story touched your heart, please like the video. If you're learning English like I was, subscribe to the channel. More emotional stories are coming. And tell me in the comments, what was the first story that made you feel something in English? Your story matters. Keep reading. Keep feeling. Keep learning. You're not just learning English. You're becoming someone new. And I believe in you.